Welcome to a series of demonstrations for the redesigned REC registry. In this demonstration, I will be providing you with an overview of lodging energy acquisition statements, EAS, including revisions, overview of shortfall charge management, an overview of surrender fees, a demonstration on how to lodge an energy acquisition revision and why it is important to lodge these before lodging the current year EAS, and a demonstration on how to lodge an EAS with partial exemption certificates. On 1 January, the surrender period will open for the current and previous assessment year. While surrender is open, you can lodge a revision for the previous year and an energy acquisition statement for the current year. If you need to lodge revisions for earlier years, please contact the Clean Energy Regulator. Surrender will close on 14 February or the following business day if 14 February falls on a weekend. Shortfall charge management. The redesigned REC registry has incorporated all shortfall charge management for shortfall charges and interest for unpaid charges. As soon as a charge is known, the REC registry will issue invoices and interest invoices as applicable. To avoid being issued with unwanted invoices for shortfalls and interest, you should surrender certificates before finalising the lodgement of a revision or energy acquisition statement. If you finalise lodgement of a revision or energy acquisition statement before surrendering certificates, the REC registry will generate the applicable invoices with a status of pending payment. Once you surrender sufficient certificates to acquit your liability, the registry will cancel all applicable invoices with a status of settled. To view invoices issued, select the Finance menu, then the Invoices menu when logged into the REC registry. If you do incur a shortfall charge, ensure you pay the charge at least 3 days before 14 February to allow for financial processing times. Interest will begin accruing for each day the charges are unpaid. Surrender fees. Once the Clean Energy Regulator accepts certificates for surrender, invoices will be automatically issued for the surrender fees. To view invoices issued, select the Finance menu, then the Invoices menu when logged into the REC registry. Now I'm going to give you a demonstration on how to lodge a revision in the REC registry. First, you'll need to log into the REC registry using your username and password. Now you are logged into the REC registry. To lodge a revision, you will need to click the Surrender menu, followed by the Liability Surrender menu. This page provides you with an overview of your liability summary back to 2001. To lodge a revision, you need to select the year for which you want to lodge the revision for. So for this demonstration, I'm going to select 2012 to lodge a revision. On the Assessment Year Summary page, at the top of the page, there is some important information that you need to read for the first time that you are lodging a revision or EAS. If you scroll down the page, you will see an overview of the assessment year, including a summary of your acquisitions, a summary of your LGC liability, and a summary of your STC liability. Once you scroll back up, to lodge a revision, you can click on the Lodge Revision button. You are on the Revised Relevant Acquisition Details page. On this page, it gives you an overview of the details of each relevant acquisition that you will need to enter. Please read this before completing the revision or energy acquisition statement. Scroll down the page, and you can see the last assessed amount that was lodged when the EAS was assessed. Now we need to revise that amount, so I'm going to increase the relevant acquisition. In this demonstration, I also need to add a relevant acquisition that I did not report previously, so I will click Add Relevant Acquisition. Now I'm going to enter in the details of that relevant acquisition. So now that you've entered in the details of the acquisition, scroll down the page and click Next to continue. On this page, it tells me information about partial exemption certificates. I will show you how to report partial exemption certificates when I lodge an EAS. For this demonstration in this revision, there are no partial exemption certificates to include, so I will click the Next button. Now I'm on an overview of my LGC liability. As I scroll down, I can see my revised relevant acquisitions, a summary of my LGC liability, and a summary of my estimated shortfalls and surpluses. On this page, I need to enter in how many LGCs I'm going to offer. The system tells me that I need to offer 18 in order to acquit the liability. It is important to note that you will still need to complete the surrender offer separate to this step, but this is just putting the information in the statement that you're completing. For this demonstration, I'm going to surrender 10 more than I required and enter 28. Once I move out of the field, the estimated shortfalls and surpluses are updated. And assuming I do surrender the 28 certificates, I will have an LGC acquitted surplus. I also need to acknowledge that if I do not surrender what I've said I will, that my shortfalls and surpluses may differ. So once I select that box, I will click Next to continue. Now I'm on the large-scale generation shortfall statement page. As I've indicated that I'm going to surrender sufficient LGCs, there is no shortfall charge. So I will click Next to continue. Now I'm on the revised STC liability page. On this page, you can see a summary of your relevant acquisitions, and scroll down further, you can see the details of your STC liability. I can see the STC required surrender amount for quarter 4, as well as the number of STCs that I need to surrender to acquit my liability for quarter 4. So now I'm going to enter in how many STCs I'm going to surrender for quarter 4. Again, I still need to go and complete the surrender offer, but I need to put the information in as part of completing this statement. Again, I'm going to surrender 58, so 10 more than are required. Once I enter in 58 and leave the field, you can see that the estimated calculations have updated. So assuming I surrender that many certificates, these will be my outcomes. Again, I need to acknowledge, if I do not surrender that number of certificates, that my surpluses or shortfalls may be different. And then I need to click Next to continue. Now on this page, we are on the Small Scale Technology shortfall statement page. Again, as I've indicated that I'm going to surrender sufficient STCs for quarter 4, and that quarter 1, 2, and 3 do not have a shortfall, there is no shortfall charge for this page. So I will click Next. Instead of finalizing the statement, I'm now going to click Save Draft and Close. I can see the draft was saved successfully. The reason for doing this is I need to go and surrender those certificates before submitting my revision. As mentioned at the beginning of this demonstration, if I were to submit the revision before surrendering certificates, I would be issued with invoices. Again, once I surrender, those invoices would be cancelled, but this is a good process to follow. So now if I scroll down the page for the assessment year summary, for 2012, I can see that there is the LGC and STC surrender button. So I'm going to click on this to surrender my LGCs and STCs for my 2012 revision. On this page, firstly, I'm going to surrender LGCs. So I'll click the LGC surrender button. You can use the filters to narrow down the certificates you'd like to surrender if you wish, but I will leave them blank for this demonstration. And click Search. Now I'm on the LGC surrender page. I'm going to surrender the 28 certificates that I said I would surrender when I was completing my revision. And click the Submit button. And I can see my LGCs were offered successfully. Now I'm going to surrender the STCs that I said I would surrender for quarter 4 by clicking on the STC surrender button. To determine the certificates to surrender, I could use the filters. Again, for this demonstration though, I'm going to leave them blank and click the Search button. Now I'm on the STC surrender page. Again, I'm going to enter in the number of certificates that I said I would surrender as I was filling in my revision. So I enter the number of certificates, scroll down the page, and I need to complete the 3 checkboxes here which confirm that I'm authorised to make this surrender and notify the regulator for the surrender. So once I've read each of the checkboxes, I will click them and then click Submit to surrender the certificates. So now that I can see those STCs were successfully offered, if I scroll down this page, I can see all of the offers that have been made for 2012 for STCs and LGCs. So to go back and to continue lodging my revision, I will click the back button at the bottom. Now I'm back on the assessment year summary page for 2012, and I'm going to click on the Lodge Revision button to complete lodging the revision. I'll scroll down the details on the relevant acquisitions page. All of the information I entered in there previously has been saved, so I'll click the Next button. Again, there are no partial exemption certificates being reported with this revision, so I'll scroll down the page and click the Next button. The LGC liability is still the same as previously and has been updated from the revision, so I will scroll down the page and click the Next button. Again, the large-scale generation shortfall statement has not changed, so I'll click the Next button. And again, with the STC liability, there have been no changes that I want to make there, so I'll click the Next button. And again, the small-scale technology shortfall statement is the same, and now I will click the Next button to finalise the lodgement. Now you are on the legal declaration page. You will need to read the information that's been presented to you on this page. Once you've read the information, you'll be required to select the checkbox to confirm that you have read the above notice and you are aware that it is a crime to provide false or misleading information. So I will click the checkbox confirming that I have read this, and I will enter in my full name and details. Now that I've entered in my name and details, to finalise the lodgement of my revision, I'm going to click the Lodge button. The confirmation message confirms that the energy acquisition revision has been successfully lodged. Now if I scroll down the page, if I did need to re-lodge the revision while surrender is open, I can click the Lodge Revision button to make any amendments if needed. Now that I'll scroll down the page though, I can see an overview of my assessment year. I can see that my revision is now pending assessment, my revised relevant acquisitions, the revised LGC liability, which includes the 28 certificates which are pending surrender, and I can also see the summary of my STC liability. And this includes the 58 certificates that are pending surrender for the 2012 revision. So now scroll back up to the top. Now that I have completed lodging a revision, I'm ready to now lodge my energy acquisition statement for the current year, which in this demonstration will be 2013. So to do so, I'm going to click back on the Liability Surrender menu item. Now I'm on my liability summary page. I can see the changes that have happened there for 2012. To lodge my 2013 statement, I need to click on the hyperlink for 2013. Now I'm on the assessment year summary. If I scroll down the page, I can see that there's no information that's been entered for my relevant acquisitions or partial exemption certificates for 2013 as yet. I can also see the summary of the LGC and STC liability. In this example, this demonstration account has had a required surrender amount for quarter 1, 2 and 3, and they have surrendered certificates above, and there's a surplus there for those 3 quarters. So now, to complete the assessment year, I will scroll back up to the top of the assessment year summary page, and I'm going to click to lodge EAS. As this is the first energy acquisition statement I'm lodging for this assessment year, I need to enter in the primary contact and secondary contact and CEO or equivalent details. For the primary contact, I can select a user from the list of users in my rec registry account. Again, for the secondary contact, I can select another user within my rec registry account. For the CEO or equivalent, I can either use a user that's in my Rec Registry account, or if they're not a user in the account, I can enter in their details. Once I've entered in their details, then I need to enter in the address of the liable entity. In this case, it will be a physical address. Now that I've entered in my contact details and address details, I can click the Next button to continue. Now I'm on the Relevant Acquisition Details page. Again, there's the important information at the top of the page, which I should read before lodging my energy acquisition statement. But now I'm going to scroll down and enter in my relevant acquisition details for the 2013 assessment year. Now, in this energy acquisition statement, I need to report more than one relevant acquisition. So I'm going to click the Add button to report a second relevant acquisition. So I'll scroll down now that the additional row has been added and enter in the second relevant acquisition details. So now that I've entered in the details for both relevant acquisitions, I'm ready to continue to the next step. So I will click the Next button. Now I am on the Partial Exemption Certificate page. On this page, I'm going to enter in partial exemption certificates. The new Rec Registry has functionality which will prevent you from using PECs which are no longer valid or are not entitled to be used by this liable entity. I'm going to enter in 4 PECs and show you what the system will do when you try to use a PEC that is not eligible to be used. So I'm going to enter in the details of the partial exemption certificates. Now that I've entered in the details for my first PEC, I need to click the Add button to add another PEC. So I'll click Add. And now I can enter in the details of my second PEC. Again, I need to click the Add button to add the details of my third PEC. I also need to complete the second one by adding in the ET activity. Now I'll enter in the details of my third PEC. And lastly, I need to add the fourth PEC, so I'll click the Add button again to enter in the fourth PEC details. So now I've entered in all the details of my PECs. As part of incorporating PECs into the Rec Registry, you will no longer need to send the physical copies of the PECs to our office. In order to do that though, you do need to read the legal declaration on the PEC page and confirm that you have read that and that you are authorised to use the PECs. So I'll click the checkbox that I have read the above notice and I'll enter in my full details. Now that I've entered in those details, I can click Next. So now I'm going to show you what happens by clicking Next and where the PECs that I have entered are incorrect or can't be used. So I'm going to click Next. So firstly, it brings up all of the errors that have come up for the PECs. So I do need to check some of this information before continuing. The first PEC has provided me with an error. So I'm having a look at that PEC now to check what information needs to be changed. I found the error, so I'm going to enter in the correct details for the ET activity. Scrolling down further, I can see that the other 2 PECs have also come up with errors. So if I scroll back up to the top of the page, the error message will tell me what issues I'm having with these PECs. So it's telling me that the PEC I have entered is invalid. So please check that I'm using a current PEC. So I will need to investigate this before I can use this PEC further. The last error message is advising me that I need to check the details of the PEC that I've entered. And all details and assessment year must match each PEC exactly. And only the liable entity nominated on the PEC is entitled to claim the partial exemption. So what you would do in this circumstance is go and investigate what errors you are finding in your PECs, verify the information and come back and complete the correct information. So for now though, I'm going to remove the third and fourth PECs by clicking the Remove button. And also the fourth PEC here. So now that both PECs have been removed, I've still got my declaration that I've agreed to entered in, so I'm going to click the next button to continue. So now that all of the PEC information contained was correct and up to date, the system will allow me to continue. Now I'm on the LGC liability page. I can see a summary of my acquisitions, a summary of my LGC liability, and my estimated shortfalls and surpluses. So now I need to enter in how many LGCs I'm going to surrender. Again, I still need to go and complete the surrender after I have filled in the details here. So I'm going to surrender 10 more than I need to. Once I've entered the information in and I leave the field, I can see that my estimations have updated, and that providing I go and surrender sufficient LGCs, as I've entered above, I will end up with a surplus. I do need to acknowledge that if I don't surrender sufficient LGCs, as I've indicated, I will result in different shortfalls or surpluses. So I'll check that box acknowledging that and scroll to the bottom of the page and click Next. As I've entered on the previous page that I will surrender sufficient LGCs for the 2013 assessment year, I will not have a shortfall charge. So there is no shortfall listed on the large-scale generation shortfall statement. So click Next to continue. Now I'm on my STC liability page. Again, I can see an overview of the relevant acquisitions, as well as a summary of my STC liability. I can see that I need to surrender a certain number of STCs to equip my liability. So I'm going to surrender 10 more to ensure that I have a surplus for the 2013 year. I've indicated I'll surrender 10 more certificates than are required, which will result in a 10 certificate surplus if I do so. I need to acknowledge that if I fail to do that, my surpluses and shortfalls may differ. So I'll click the Next button. Again, on the Small Scale Technology Shortfall Statement page, as I've indicated that I will surrender sufficient STCs for quarter 4, and there is no shortfall for quarter 1, 2, or 3, there is no shortfall. So I will click Next to continue. Now I'm on the legal declaration page, but again, what I'm going to do is scroll back down to the bottom and click the previous button. I want to click the Save, Draft, and Close button. This is because if I want to submit the energy acquisition statement before surrendering certificates, once I lodge the statement, I will be issued with shortfall charge invoices. Once I surrender, the invoices would be cancelled. However, to avoid them being issued, I'm going to click Save, Draft, and Close and surrender the certificates that I said I would before continuing. So now the draft has been saved successfully. So I'm going to scroll down and I'm going to click on the LGC and STC surrender button for 2013. So now I'm going to click on the LGC surrender button to surrender LGCs. So I'm going to leave the search filters blank. You could enter in some information here to narrow down the certificates you want to surrender if you wish, but we'll leave them blank for this demonstration. So I'll click Search to continue. Now I'm going to enter the number of LGCs that I indicated I would surrender when I started completing my EAS. So I'm going to enter in the 1,554 certificates that I entered and click Submit. Now I get the confirmation message confirming that LGCs have been surrendered successfully. So now I'm going to click on STC Surrender to surrender my STCs for quarter 4. I'm going to leave the filters blank again, click Search, and I'm going to enter in the number of STCs I indicated I would in my EAS. Again, I also need to confirm that I'm authorised to surrender these certificates and acknowledge that I'm going to notify the regulator as part of this. Once I've read each of these 3 sentences, I will click each checkbox, scroll to the bottom of the page and click Submit to complete the surrender. So now I get the confirmation message confirming STCs have been surrendered successfully. So now I need to go back and complete lodging my energy acquisition statement. So I'll scroll to the bottom of this page and click the back button. And this takes me back to the assessment year summary for 2013. So now I need to click on Lodge EAS. You can see all of the information that we entered in when we saved our draft has been saved. So we see all of the details here and click Next to continue. Again, on the relevant acquisition details page, all of the information entered has been saved, so I'll click Next to continue. And the partial exemption certificates which were validly entered are still there. Now, as I've come back in, and this could be a different user doing this, I do need to redeclare that I'm eligible and allowed to use these PECs. So I'll select the checkbox confirming I've read the notice in relation to PECs and enter in my details. And then once I've done that, I'll click Next to continue. So now we're on the LGC liability page. We can see the same information as previous and we don't need to change anything here. So I will click Next to continue. On the large-scale generation shortfall statement page, again, no shortfall charge, and I'll click Next to continue. On the STC liability page, everything is the same and no changes are required, so I will click Next to continue. And lastly, on the small-scale technology shortfall statement, there are no changes to the charge, so again, I'll click Next to continue. So now that I'm on the legal declaration page, I need to read the information presented to me on this page, and once I've read the information, I need to verify that I have and confirm that I've read the above notice and I'm aware that it is a crime to provide false or misleading information. So I'll click that checkbox and then enter in my full details. Now I'm ready to lodge, and I will click the Lodge button to lodge the energy acquisition statement. So now I get a confirmation message coming up that advises me the energy acquisition statement has been successfully lodged. If I scroll down the page, I can see an overview of my relevant acquisitions and PECs, a summary of my LGC liability, and a summary of my STC liability. Now, if I want to see the exact information that I entered with a revision or an energy acquisition statement, at any time I can click on the Statements and Assessments button. So to review the information I entered in the 2013 EAS, I'm going to click on the Statements and Assessments button. And now I'm on a page which gives me a bit of an overview of the statements that I have lodged. So for this liable entity, they have only lodged one energy acquisition statement. So to view the energy acquisition statement, I will click on the hyperlink for that EAS. Now I'm on the EAS page. This shows me all the information that I entered when I lodged the EAS. It provides me with an overview of my relevant acquisitions, my PECs, summary of the acquisitions, as well as my LGC liability and my STC liability. Once the Clean Energy Regulator has completed the assessment of an energy acquisition statement, you will come to these pages to review more details in relation to the assessment and to see if the outcomes of the assessment are different to what was reported. For more information about the renewable energy target or changes to the REC registry, please contact us at 1300 553 542 or via email at retscheme@cleanenergyregulator.gov.au or visit us at the web at ret.cleanenergyregulator.gov.au.